You went down to Iowa. It's natural for pundits and news people like the one behind you to ask whether you're running for president or what separates you from the top dude, which is Donald Trump. I know that's a deflection, so I'm glad you're able to get out those things. I'm begging you. I'm just going to put it this way. I am urging you as one of the top Republicans in the nation, because you are a governor of a state, to separate, to find that separation between a Doug Burgum and I don't care what that name is. Just don't put this man on the ballot. Don't do that. And I'm asking you, will you work to help me on that? Will you do everything you can to make sure he isn't the standard bearer? Because he is the biggest threat to this nation. That's Joel Heitkamp's opinion. All right, I get it. Let me ask you this. The governor of the great state of North Dakota is in the House. He's given us a bunch of time, and we're going to get a chance to talk to him about the legislature, about a number of things that are out there and what's going on. But obviously, Governor, this isn't how I thought we were going to start the conversation when we called you, and you said, "You bet, I'm coming in. Let's take some time." But because of what happened last night with Rupak Gandhi and what he spoke to his school board on, it's definitely out there as one of the topics today. So what the superintendent of the Fargo Public Schools said is, in the interest of children and the high rate of suicide, that he will not basically adhere to the law that you just signed, the legislation you just signed into law in regards to trans students. I want your thoughts on that.
Well, first of all, I would just say that I'm in agreement about the concerns about youth suicide in North Dakota. I mean, this is something that we should every adult should be concerned about that. And some of the statistics are alarming about that. And same with a lot of other things. We've got to really focus on our youth, particularly now when we've got, we're blessed we have so many youth. We're a young and growing state. But the controversy last night, all I know is what I've read in the article in the paper this morning. So I wasn't, haven't seen transcripts, wasn't at the meeting, but just having read the paper, what was reported is there seems to be some confusion about the state law and some of the headlines I've seen about that law. And I just think before this thing completely blows up and everybody gets wound up, they should actually read the law. It's like a single page. The first section is an affirmation of free speech, neither, restrict or prohibit. I mean, it's not. So again, there is, I don't want to call it a nothing burger or code clutter, but it is the first section of that bill is just an affirmation of free speech. So it doesn't require anybody to do something that would be against their free speech rights. It doesn't demand that they do something against that. It doesn't tell them they can't do it. And so that I'd say that's the first part. The second part is about involving parents, and there's nothing in this bill about outing students. It basically says that a school district can't withhold or conceal information about a student if the parent asks, and that's just common sense. I mean, I felt like, well, we're codifying what I hope is happening. I hope if a parent walks into a school district in North Dakota and asks a question about their kid that nobody's concealing or withholding information, unless there's a known situation, because in the law there's a carve-out that says that if you know that there's a situation where maybe there's suspected abuse at home or some other thing like that, there's protections for teachers and organizations that protect kids if they think they have a reason. So it says, notwithstanding other aspects of law. So this thing was basically, I felt, codifying what already goes on today in our schools and in our communities and in the relationship between parents and teachers and school districts. But so if they're saying that they're going to defy state law, I'm not sure what law they're actually defying, because I don't know what they'd be doing that's in defiance of free speech or in defiance of common sense. So I again would just want to understand, make sure that everybody's actually read what was signed and not the title of the bill. Actually read the words themselves.
Then why did we need it?
Well, we wouldn't have necessarily needed it, but this is a good question to ask the whole legislature. There's over 900 bills introduced. You've served in the legislature, you know that, and there's was all kinds of things that got passed this year, and there might have been 22 bills for one category of culture war, and no effort to consolidate those down into one coherent thing that made sense. And in some cases, the bills got modified, change to the point where not much was less but the title. But the people that introduced those bills want to pass that bill and claim a victory. So it's an interesting time in politics today that is influencing the way the legislature conducts business on some of these policy areas. And so, it's a good question for the legislative leaders.
But you signed it.
I signed it.
Okay.
I mean, when something that doesn't actually affect anyone and it passes by more than a supermajority, for me to veto that and then put it back on my desk a day later and have it turn into law anywhere when the law doesn't do anything. But those are choices you make, because I want to save vetoes for things where I'm actually trying to stop bad policy, as opposed to sort of critiquing a legislative process where if they decide they want to spend taxpayer dollars talking about these things for months and putting together a bill that does or doesn't do anything, because that's important to them, I guess that's their prerogative as a separate branch of government.
So, Governor, you've played your career out on a national stage. I mean, you did. That's what you brought into this office when you ran. The perception people can have of North Dakota. You tried beating some of that down at Great Plains, then Microsoft. And I guess what I'm leading up to here is, why would we allow North Dakota to play out nationally the way we did this session? And by that specifically, I mean bills like the trans bill. I mean bills, these social bills that came, and I think oftentimes we use terms like the legislature. Governor, it was the Republicans in the legislature. It was not the Democrats that did this. It was the Republicans in the legislature that made this session all about social bills. And I have to ask you, because I'm pretty confident I knew what your position was before you ever put your name on the big door. Why did we have to become the state with the toughest abortion laws out there?
Well, Joel, I can't remember exactly when you left the legislature, but you knew the law that was in effect.
2008.
Yeah, so
long time ago.
2007 was when the trigger bill was passed. That was the one this is the bill that's going to go into effect when Roe v. Wade's overturned. Roe v. Wade was overturned, and so the bill that was passed when you were in the legislature, which included bipartisan support, there were Democrats at the time that were part of that bill. And that was the bill that became law. That's the bill that's being challenged in the courts, the 2007. So the new bill that I signed is actually less restrictive than the 2007 bill. It takes out some of the criminalization for doctors. It provides exceptions for rape and incest. So the bill that was signed was actually less restrictive. So if you're saying we're the most restrictive, we're actually less restrictive today than we were before I signed it.
First off, I fought it in 2007, but that's neither here nor there. This bill claims to have exceptions for rape or incest. That is based upon that being reported before 6 weeks. You have a daughter, I have two daughters. I mean, you've married. You know that women in many cases don't know they're pregnant within 6 weeks. They don't. You also know, because you're a pretty bright guy, we both know women that have been raped. Mm-hmm. And we both know they don't want to come forward and say, I've been raped. And so what this bill does is it claims to have an exemption that it really doesn't. And it puts a burden onto women that shouldn't be there. Now, that's Joel Heitkamp's opinion. I want to know yours.
Well, Joel, I think this is an issue if you're talking about the signing of a bill. This is a bill, again, our legislative makeup, 90% approximately Republican, 10% Democrat, passes by that margin. This is a thing where, again, you veto that bill and it's back on your desk the next day.
So what? Make them. I mean, people always ask me, how come I voted in the minority? Because that's where I stood. I believe that a woman who has been raped, that doesn't even know that she's pregnant, that is sitting there within a time span that she doesn't even know yet that she's missed her period, deserves to be able to terminate that pregnancy. Now, if you veto that bill, that's where Doug Burgum is. That's where the governor of the great state of North Dakota is, and that's what gets reported nationally. Instead, what got reported nationally was that you supported the exemption being that small, that narrow, to where it really wasn't anything that was needed. And so, to me, you are the face of North Dakota. You're one of the people that they look at, the name they recognize. And so who gives a damn if they override your veto? You could have sent a message about where North Dakota stood with its governor.
Well, I think I would have been sending a message about where I stood, and I'm not sure that's a message certainly not the message where the North Dakota legislature stands.
So do you believe that 6 weeks is enough for an exemption?
I think the 6 week, I think we're going to see across the nation, because this battle's going on now that we have Roe v. Wade. This Roe v. Wade, I believe that Roe v. Wade, states should decide. We're going to end up with different states with different time frames. Minnesota's going to be different than North Dakota. And it's going to be decided first in the legislature. And if people don't like what the legislator does, then it's going to turn into Kansas, and it'll be ballot initiatives.
But Governor, you didn't answer my question. Do you believe that 6 weeks is enough to say we have an exemption?
I think this is the decision that again has been put back on the states. I think it's a decision that if people don't like what the legislature in North Dakota is doing, then people should do a ballot initiative, or they should run for the legislature.
But you signed it. So it isn't, the process is this. Yes, the legislature, and we'll talk about more examples where, to me, you were spot on. Now, I want to say this.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just this issue. I thought what you did in the area of libraries and respecting library boards and librarians, kudos. We'll get to that in a second. What I'm saying is by putting your name on the bottom of that bill, you said that the governor of the great state of North Dakota believes that this is a large enough exemption for women who have been raped to have an abortion. And what I'm asking you is, do you believe that? Do you believe 6 weeks is long enough, Governor?
Well, Joel, you understand that we're operating in a state that has right now, with our one clinic, moved to Minnesota. And so this is basically we're having a question. You're asking me a question that's going to end up being decided in the courts.
Right. But what I'm asking you is what you believe. It's pretty much a yes or no. I can tell you right now what I believe. I don't believe 6 weeks is long enough. I don't. What I'm asking you is, do you believe that 6 weeks is long enough?
Joel, I think that, again, this is a question that's going to be decided in the courts. That's where I think it's going to be decided.
Let's take a little break. When we come back, and I do mean that I want to compliment you on this isn't all just nose to nose on this. Yeah. But here's the other part, Doug. Governor, we've known each other for a while.
Doug's fine, Joel.
Here's the other part. You're sitting here, you're not in some comfortable setting, and you're taking questions like this. Kudos to you for that. I mean, kudos. I mean, other people, it's easy to run, it's easy to hide. And I already congratulated you on the library bill. I want to give you a chance to speak to that. Why did you veto it?
Well, Joel, North Dakota is interesting in the legislature, our state. This, again, it's so great talking to someone who's been there, but every bill that gets introduced has to be voted on the floor. Nothing gets killed in committee. We see bills all the time where I'm like, who's the constituent here? And they're like, well, it's one person. One person went to one legislator. We have 3 legislators for every 16,000 people. They went to them and said, we need to pass this law. I look at these things all the time. Some of them we work to get killed before they ever get to my desk, which is key when you've got a super majority. Bad stuff's got to get killed. When I say bad stuff, some of that is like, this isn't a state law. I mean, this should be done at the city commission, the county commission, like the approval voting.
Local library board.
Local library board. And sometimes it's the condo association. And sometimes it might be like 2 neighbors. I mean, you guys go figure it out. We don't need a state law for this. So part of it is this belief in local control and limited government. How do you do that? But the library bill is to me was an easy one, which is we're not going to criminalize librarians. I mean, they have a hard enough time. We can't, if every bill we pass is, here's one incident that happened in one library, so now we need a statewide law, and we got to criminalize anybody from doing this thing. No one's going to want to work in our state, much less librarians. And so that was an easy call, and it's just common sense. Again, the system we have today is working. It's not a crisis in terms of what kinds of material people are accessing in our public libraries in the state, and we shouldn't try to manufacture it into a crisis.
Well, if you're going to have that crisis and address it, you're going to have to include cell phones in the conversation. right?
Yeah,
you're going to have to. Because
we have a thing. It's called the internet.
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask you about this because I want to compliment you as well on vetoing the bill that would have put public dollars into private schools. Now, I read your opinion on why you vetoed it, and you said it didn't go far enough, and I didn't agree with your opinion on why you vetoed it. And so I'm going to ask you two questions on this. Number one, did you get a lot of calls from the public to veto it?
Yes, and
that means we did our job here.
I think they all said we're calling on behalf of Joel Heitkamp. So.
Tell the ladies at the front desk who that we're kind of sorry. Let me just say this as well. Your stance on it doesn't go far enough. I'm trying to figure out how it ever can. If I'm in Napoleon or if I'm in Killdeer or any of these places, how do I ever get access to that private school that would justify ever using public money for it?
Well, I think we have to look to the example of what Iowa passed this year as an example, because they're a rural state and they've got the same issue, which is if you want, and again, understand the largest chunk of the general fund now, $2.3 billion of a $6.1 billion general fund is K-12. The state pays over 70% of those expenses for K-12. So then if you say, hey, if we're going to spend this kind of money and we're going to, increase it, drive money, teacher salaries, all the things we did, because we're huge supporters financially of K-12 and higher ed, which we need because, and thank goodness we're a growing state again, Joel, not like we were my whole life. I mean, we have 65,000 kids that are 5 and under. They're coming into the school system. So we should expect more from that system. We have spent the last 6 years passing a whole bunch of things around innovation in K-12. We have less than 10% of the districts that have adopted any of the things that will allow them to be, more innovative, more competitive, better results, more modern. I go and I shadow kids in schools, and a lot of it feels like when you and I went to school. So I've kind of concluded the one thing that's going to happen to get this thing where we're actually driving K-12 education to a new place is competition. And what Iowa did is they said, okay, if we're spending $10,000 per student for public school, we're going to have $7,000 be available to a parent. So we'll save 30%, and the parent can decide, they want to go to some kind of, private opportunity. They want to go to a homeschool. What do they want to do? The money follows the student, as opposed to the money follows a building or an institution. And so when you do that, all of a sudden you have real competition. So in your Napoleon example, if you had 100 people there that said, hey, in that area, we want to start a new Montessori school. It's not religious affiliated. We want to do a new innovation school. We want to do a STEM school. We want to do something. They'd have enough capital. They say we could do that. So innovation could flourish if we do that. Arizona's done something very similar. They call it universal school choice. The thing that I vetoed was $10 million. People think that's a big number. That's less. That's not even a half of 1% of what we spend on schools. It wouldn't even have covered. It was like a scholarship for kids going to Shanley.
The old adage of the legislature, it's the camel's nose under the tent. It's how you start. And my point is this. First off, your children went to private school, right?
No.
One went to Oak Grove?
Two went. Well, they went a combination of public Montessori, but Jesse went all the way through public. And it served
you well. So I'm not trying to pretend that
some
public,
of each.
Yeah. But my point in raising that question is it's a choice that the Burgums made, and you paid for it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and you could afford to pay for it, but public school was waiting there for you if you needed it, right?
Right.
Okay. For me, and where did you go to school?
I went to school at Arthur.
And that's a public school.
Yes.
And today you're the governor of the great state of North Dakota. Public school treated you fine.
It did.
Yesterday, the standard bearer for your party, a former president and the top, he's certainly in the lead to get the nomination again to run for president again. Donald Trump was convicted of sexual assault. Will you support him for president? Or does this end it for you?
Well, I think the nation right now at the critical juncture we are with the everything with the global instability in particular, that if this is a Trump versus Biden, that's a bad thing, bad choice for both parties. And I think that the nation would be well served if Americans had an opportunity to vote for some alternatives in 2024.
You're not going to get any pushback from me on that. That's not my question.
Right.
My question is, would Donald Trump ever get your support as governor of North Dakota in his race for presidency, knowing what you know today versus 2 days ago?
Well, I don't think it's just I don't think it's just about 2 days ago, but I think, as a Republican, I would love to see a nominee from our party be someone who has the principles in terms of where we need to go economically, in terms of where we need to go for the battling inflation, energy policy, all the things that would be good for our country and be good for the world. And if that individual, this job is a tough job. And if you're distracted by ongoing personal legal issues, I mean, generally, these are the kinds of things where people might say, hey, maybe they shouldn't be, running for any office because they've got so many issues that they're battling. And I think it's just a giant distraction, and I think it hurts the party. I think we know that we had issues, down ticket in 18, 20, and 22 related to some of these distractions. And I think it'd be, fantastic for the party if we could have a distraction-free 2024 election.
You went down to Iowa to meet some folks, hold a little open house forum. Are you still considering running for president?
We've been so focused. I think we said when we walked in the studio, I mean, we were, signing and vetoing bills right up till last night. So the full focus has been on the job here in North Dakota. But now I'd say starting today, we look forward to 2024. No decisions have been made about what we might do either in state or out of state. But
you did go down to Iowa during the session.
We did for a week. We went on a Friday afternoon, came back on a Sunday.
I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to go. That's
right.
not my point. But you can't use the excuse of it was during the session, we're too busy for you to answer. Are you considering running for president?
Well, when the weekend I went down, there was no bills on my desk. We were all caught up, so we were. We
I don't doubt that.
But
I'm
anyway,
not calling you lazy.
And Catherine and I had a great weekend down there, and we did a dozen events, talked to over 200 people, and learned a lot of great things around value-added agriculture. Had a great sit down with Kim Reynolds, who is the leader of the RGA right now, the chairman. We spent some time with her.
Are you considering running for president?
We are going to take some time right now, starting today, to think about what our future might hold.
The fact that you couldn't answer it other than that tells me that you're considering running for president.
You can, Joel, you're a smart guy. You're a pundit. You can take that wherever you want to take that.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's go here. You're on a stage, and it's just you and Donald Trump. You're the only two left. And one of you two is going to get the nomination for president. And I'm the moderator of that debate. And I look at Governor Doug Burgum. I say, Governor Burgum, you can ask Donald Trump any question, one question. Now, you, being a smart person, know that this needs to be a separation. There needs to be a real difference between you and him. What question would you ask Donald Trump?
Joel, you've asked me a lot of questions over the years. That's a really good one that I don't have a good answer for right now.
That's fair. That's completely fair.
Yeah.
But to me, that opportunity to look at him and then know that you're really not speaking to him. Mm. You're speaking to those individuals who need to know what is different from you to him. And so I'm what is different? What is the main thing that separates you two? Because oftentimes with Donald Trump and his popularity in the Republican Party, it feels like good and decent people have to fall in line and do whatever he says and aren't willing. And there's exceptions. Mitt Romney, there's other exceptions of people that Liz Cheney that are really conservatives that don't fall in line. I get that. But it just feels like people just adhere to this man when he's not a good person. And so what I want to know is what that separator is.
Well, I think, again, the key question, I mean, because I'm here to talk really, and I would love to talk about everything we accomplished in the legislature. We've talked about a few vetoes, but we haven't touched on historic tax relief for the state of North Dakota.
You can stay longer than they told me.
We haven't touched on we passed this historic animal agriculture, pension reform. We got 20 things done this legislature that are absolutely important for North Dakotans, and the whole reason I would am saying this is I don't want to have, even in this moment, be the national politics of Donald Trump and culture wars have been such a distraction. They were to the legislature, but I want the people of North Dakota to know that we got the work done for them in spite of all those distractions here in North Dakota. We passed 51 out of 52 red tape reduction bills that we introduced. Since Ed Schaefer's been there, we've been trying to get pension reform. We've got that thing that protects the state employees. It protects the taxpayers from maybe having to put up $1 billion of taxpayer money to cover those retirement things. And we've got a 401k plan that's going to go. In fact, it's going to help us recruit the next 1,000 state team members we need to run government, because there's about 1,000 baby boomers retiring in the next 18 months. And so the what we got done for Parks and Rec, K-12, record funding, higher education, there's over $330 million in new dollars going to repair, replace, and fix up what we need for engineering and research and ag research in our state. So this was a historic session by many, many measures. But again, like we've seen in the last half hour, we can get distracted by these things that don't really affect regular North Dakotans. And that's what we've been focused on.
That's coming from your side of the aisle, in all due respect, Governor. That is. You've got Republicans who have gone out to the legislature with these strict ideologies. I can use names if you want, but you already know them. And they went out there, and their whole Bastiat focus has been on social issues, and they're getting the game plan from a national scale. I'm serious. I mean, Jim Casper doesn't come up with these ideas on his own. This is a guy I want to play pinochle against, because it won't take long to get his money. I mean, this guy is getting his ideas from a national group that is willing to donate to him. Now, that being said, they're the ones taking the oxygen out of the room. These bills are ridiculous. They're stupid. And in the end, they end up having to be dealt with by people like you. And I would argue some of them you shouldn't have signed. We had that debate just a little bit ago. You went down to Iowa. It's natural for pundits and news people like the one behind you to ask whether you're running for president or what separates you from the top dude, which is Donald Trump. I know that's a deflection, so I'm glad you're able to get out those things. I'm begging you. I'm just going to put it this way. I am urging you, as one of the top Republicans in the nation, because you are a governor of a state, to separate, to find that separation between a Doug Burgum and I don't care what that name is. Just don't put this man on the ballot. Don't do that. And I'm asking you, will you work to help me on that? Will you do everything you can to make sure he isn't the standard bearer? Because he is the biggest threat to this nation. That's Joel Heitkamp's opinion. All right, I get it. Let me ask you this. In terms of North Dakota and where you see us going, I know that you've talked a lot about higher education and having to revamp the higher education system, the model. Do you see us moving forward on that? Because I know you know that North Dakota State College of Science is near and dear to me. I just broadcast from Williston State. The job that these trade and tech schools are doing is amazing. Is that model finding its way through to our universities, and I know everybody's changing names. They want to be called this or that, but to NDSU and UND? Well,
I think we're starting in the right direction, but we have to go faster. I mean, we saw this during COVID. It's demographically, the number of students that are available in that 18 to 22 thing, there are two ways. One is that a smaller group, and they have more alternatives, both online. I mean, they don't even leave the state. They can stay in the state and take an online course or someplace else. But they also, with these 35,000 available jobs, we all know that you can get a certificate training, you can get a trade thing. You have all kinds of ways to have a great living and a great life and never get a 4-year degree. And so culturally, demographically, technologically, economically, with all the debt, all that, we've got a tuition freeze in this budget. We have a tuition freeze. That's great for students. We're freezing tuition. It might have even been great if we'd have said to the universities, you're going to have to figure out how to trim your budgets to cover that. Instead, the state of North Dakota, the taxpayers are paying $45 million to our higher ed institutions to hold them harmless from the fact that they couldn't raise tuition. So we're insulating our 11 universities from market forces. Somebody out there is saying, hey, I can't either afford, or the value of what I'm paying to go to school isn't worth what the tuition you were charging, so I need a scholarship, or I need a tuition freeze, and the taxpayer's got to pay the difference. That should be a market signal. If we insulate our institutions from what the market is telling them, they're not going to evolve fast enough and quick enough. But what do we have in the budget? Again, between the special session and right now, close to $400 million in new buildings. I mean, does a new building give us higher graduation rates? Does it give us more engineers? Does it give us more teachers?
More students.
More students, and that stuff. We're adding to the fixed cost base at a time when we ought to be focusing at outcomes versus inputs. But you know how it works in the legislature. Everybody comes, yeah, they've got an old building. Yeah, it needs to be replaced. I mean, they can show that there's a need, but they have that whole discussion without talking about what's going on in the building. So we've got.
See, we were going to find things we agree on.
Yeah, so we've got risks ahead of us. But on Williston, Wahpeton, all these things. I mean, Dickinson State 4-year school, they're moving to 2-year programs. Related to ag. I mean, so we've got.
When all this new building started happening at NDSU, an institution near and dear to you, you're an alumni. And for me, I look at UND, and that's no different. I'm not trying to make NDSU out to be the villain here. But when they kept talking about more housing, I kept saying, why? Mm-hmm. I mean, why? That is not going to be the model of higher education in the future. They're not going to be on campus.
Right.
But people wanted it, and the people that wanted it didn't want it for higher education. They wanted it for different reasons.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your pushing on that.
Fortunately, no state dollars are going into dorms or did go into dorms. Most of those were built with private dollars. But, even like adding more classrooms, and we got all kinds of commercial space. I mean, Mary walks into Fargo 25 years ago and rents space in the Butler building and started offering an evening MBA program when nobody else in town was offering an evening MBA program.
Well, look at the marriage now between Williston State and UMary.
Yes.
Good. Well, good.
Yes.
Talk to each other.
Because a private institution like UMary has got to go out and hustle. They got to be entrepreneurial, and they go develop partnerships.
Yep. Governor, thank you. Thank you for coming in. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you, Joel.